Comic books are really hard to get into. Like, really hard to get into. They're long form storytelling, obviously, and their stories go back for 80 years in Superman's case. And there are plenty of reasons why it's so hard to get into comics. But one of them, and the one I want to talk about today, is the sliding time scale, also known as a floating time scale or Marvel time. Marvel time wasn't introduced initially. At first, Marvel and DC characters both aged in real time. In Amazing Spider-Man 15, Peter Parker was a high school sophomore, and 3 years later he graduated in Amazing Spider-Man issue 28. He went into college, and 13 years after that, he graduated. This extended schooling wasn't because he was a bad student, but because Marvel realized they needed to extend his time in college to keep him young, so they implied that those 13 years of real life time all took place over 4 years. This effort to keep their heroes young while keeping them in modern day coincides with the birth of Franklin Richards, leading many fans to believe that Franklin's intense powers are keeping their heroes from aging. And while that's a fun explanation, it is just a cover-up for Marvel's editorial. Now, before we go any further, I do want to address the benefit of Marvel time, because I want to make sure you guys get a full picture, and I do think that it is an important point. The main pro is that it keeps certain characters relevant. Having the entire Marvel history be condensed in the last 10 or 15 years, which is what Marvel time does, leaves certain origins in the past. Iron Man, for example, originally had his origins in the Vietnam War, but more recently, like as seen in the Iron Man movie, that has been changed to that war in Afghanistan instead, keeping his origins relevant, but even that comes with its drawbacks. Recently, there have been numerous new heroes that Marvel has been pushing. Miles Morales, Riri Williams, and Kamala Khan an example. All of them are younger characters taking place of older characters. Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Miss Marvel. But because of the sliding time scale, these characters will be in perpetual adolescence. However, if the characters were allowed to grow older, and potentially retire in the case of Tony and Peter, then maybe we could watch the younger ones grow into their own. You can maybe have Tony or Peter mentor them, but keep them out of the superhero game. This would create a much easier way to get into comics and allow better development of these characters. If Peter Parker isn't Spider-Man anymore and instead Miles is, then suddenly the confusing clone saga doesn't need to be known just to understand what's going on, and it makes it much easier to hop on board with comics. And as they go older, they mature, and their characters develop. Batman Beyond is a great example of how both of these points play out, and this brings us to how DC did it so well for so many years, and how they fail now. DC now has a similar sliding time scale that's somehow more confusing, but I won't go into that right now. But for a long time they didn't. Their characters aged at almost normal pace, nothing as precise as Peter Parker's 4 years of high school, but they still aged. The best example of this is the Bat family, specifically its Robins. Dick Grayson, the first Robin, grew up and became Nightwing, becoming older as his fans did. He was replaced by another Robin, and as each Robin left their role, a new one took his place. Their fans moving on and growing up with them, and newer fans hopping on with the new one. That wasn't until Damian. Damian is the current Robin, and since the sliding time scale has been put in place, he has been the same age for 12 years. And he's kind of stuck there. We've shown various features where Damian or really any of the Robins become Batman, after Bruce is dead, retired, or gone. But with a small exception, we will never see this as anything but a future. If characters just grew up, fans could have seen how Damian grew up and became Batman. So, while the Bat family showed an incredible example of real-time aging, they now show how disappointing it is when they don't. In conclusion, do I think they should remove Marvel time? The short answer is, which you can probably guess from me asking it at all, that I don't think they should. I wish they would have never added it in the first place, but at this point it's too late, and comic fans, including myself, notoriously hate change. If we never started this, I feel like we would be more willing to move on, but we can't do that anymore. So while I love the idea of real-time aging, it's not really possible. But if you really need this idea in your life, then Justice Comics do this. Though aging is slowed a little bit, it's not stopped entirely like everything else by the Big Two. Unfortunately, it looks like to be finishing its run soon, but it really shows how incredible it can be.